I'm live. Hello. So can we pull the presentation up? Because that would make my job easier. There it is. Awesome. How are we doing? Are your bellies full? Yeah, no kidding. Mine is too. That was wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed tonight. Thank you so much for coming. So how many of you are more than done with COVID? Yes, yes, so am I. So am I. So tonight we're going to talk about moving forward, but we're going to go back and revisit a couple things so that you can, it's not moving forward. Yep, there it is. Oh, it jumped twice. Come in. Oh, there it is. But we want you to, okay, now we got it. We're moving. So we're going to go over some things that we know in the medical world that we think you should know so that you can move forward too. So those of you that don't know me, my name's Lexi Sandifer, and my husband and I own a chiropractic and multidisciplinary clinic in Olympia, West Olympia, and it's going on 31 years. So we've been around the block or two or three or 10. So we work with a lot of different medical professionals in the communities, and not only are they patients of ours, but we just interact with them, so we get to hear their feedback as well. So the goal for tonight is to give you guys a little more information and some background. So taking us back a bit about the pandemic, I did a little more research to help you gain a little bit more knowledge and found some interesting information. Some of you are familiar with The Lancet. It is a medical journal, and the premier of premier doctors are, and epidemiologists, immunologists, et cetera, are represented in The Lancet. And I found a study that was in 2007, and it's called The Untapped Potential of Virtual Game Worlds to Shed Light on Real-World Epidemics. And it's on the game World of Warcraft. If anybody played that or heard of that game, there you go. So it's been around for a while. So the interesting thing is there's a doctor, and his name's Eric T. Lofgren, and he's an infectious disease epidemiologist. And on September 13th of 2005, 4 million players, can you turn me down a little? There's feedback. 4 million players of, they call it WoW, for those of you that don't know, had an unintentional game error that was introduced in a software update, and it was a full-blown epidemic. So it was an unintentional error, but somehow a whole bunch of gamers or whoever created the game, this magically appeared, and they called it a whoops. So players exploring a brand new spatial area in the game called Zelgrub encountered an extremely virulent, highly contagious disease. And the disease soon spread to the densely populated capital cities in the game, causing high rates of mortality, and to Lofgren, social chaos that comes from a large-scale outbreak of a deadly disease. The centerpiece of the new arena was a combative encounter with a powerful creature called Hakar. Occasionally, one of the players facing this massive winged serpent was purposely infected by a disease called corrupted blood. This infection, as intended, then rapidly began infecting other nearby players. And the powerful players that battled Hakar, the disease was just a hindrance to them, and it was designed to make this particular combat more challenging. But several aspects of the disease caused this minor inconvenience to blossom into an uncontrolled, game-wide epidemic. In the game, players could transport themselves from one location to the next that set it up to be a plague. Many victims of corrupted blood reached heavily populated areas before either being killed by or cured by the disease. This mimicked the travel of contagious carriers over long distances that had been the hallmark of many disease outbreaks in history, world history. The second factor that kept the game epidemic going is that the disease could escape its origin in Zilgrub via interspecies transmission from the player's characters to animals and then back again. The pets in the game acted as carriers of the disease and served as a source of disease by causing new outbreaks when brought out of stasis, even if their owner had recovered and was no longer infectious. To the game's powerful players, the disease was no more threatening than the common cold in a healthy adult. Less powerful characters that were not supposed to enter Zelgrub or encountered the disease died very quickly from its effects. He says, I liken it to our children, elderly or immunocompromised, already dead. The living either left the urban, so what they found, he likened it to the three characteristics of our population of children, elderly, and immunocompromised. But what he found is that if they got tired in this game and decided they would either leave the urban centers and get out of it to avoid the fake infection, or they left the game completely until the software defect, quote unquote, could be fixed. So during the game epidemic, the non-player characters served as asymptomatic carriers capable of spreading the disease, creating a nearly unbreakable chain of infection between highly infectious non-player characters, player characters, and their pets. And to continue the epidemic further in the game, a cycle was created that resurrected weaker characters, came back to the game due to other characters that had healing abilities. Doctors. This was the first online instance of uncontrolled plague to affect millions of Americans, Asians, and Europeans at home. The game mirrored an aspect of real-world epidemiology. In order to control the outbreak in the game, Blizzard Entertainment, who makes it, their employees imposed quarantine measures, isolating infected players from an uninfected area. Their strategies failed because of the highly contagious nature of the disease and the inability to seal off sections of the game, and more than likely, resistance to the notion of quarantining. Finally, Blizzard employees reset the game and the plague disappeared. Dr. Lofgren's other papers that he wrote that I thought you'd be interested in from 2010 to 2014 is Pandemic Preparedness Strategies for School Systems. Is Closure the Only Way? Disproportional Effects in Populations of Concern for Pandemic Influenza, Insights for Seasonal Epidemics, Performance of Rapid Influenza Testing, Visualizing Results from Transmission Models, Modeling the Impact of Interventions on an Epidemic of Ebola mobility data, and mathematical models, a key tool for Ebola outbreak response. So Dr. Eric, surprisingly, currently works at Washington State University as a professor for the Paul G. Allen School for Global Health. March 18th of 2021, he was awarded a grant from the National Science Foundation for $200,000. The funding is to study how the interaction between hospital or nursing home facilities and the community affects the spread of infectious disease. Where did COVID start? Nursing home, Seattle, Kirkland. October 6, 2022, he has been awarded $2.6 million in grants, $1.8 million from the NIH, and $877,000 from the CDC to improve infectious disease modeling. Isn't that interesting? So when we move forward, in April 13, 2020, on PC Gamer, he comes up again. And turns out their knowledge of WOW's infamous epidemic has helped them to prepare to tackle COVID-19. So they used that unexpected game, that the corrupted blood, to now what they did was study how people handled that information on the game and how they played the game, and use that to model after COVID-19. So what they said in this is the researchers who once studied World of Warcraft's corrupted blood plague are now fighting the coronavirus. It turns out their knowledge of WOW's infamous epidemic helped them prepare. And he says, Dr. Lofgren, I'm an infectious disease epidemiologist, so emerging infectious diseases are kind of my wheelhouse. He now works at WSU in one of the United States hardest hit, Washington, by a coronavirus so far, when this was written. Dr. Eric's research is focused on healthcare-associated infections. He is working to understand how hard COVID will impact the U.S. healthcare system, so he gathers data on how likely patients are to be hospitalized and need respirators, and how likely the infection is to spread to doctors and nurses. Dr. Eric points out significant parallels between his 2007 WOW research paper in The Lancet. He says, for me, WOW was a good illustration of how important it is to understand behaviors. It's a virus that's spreading between people and how people interact and behave and comply with authority figures, or don't. You can't really predict, oh yeah, everyone will quarantine, it'll be fine. No, they won't, he says. So then we move forward in time, and the World Economic Forum, do you remember this? Yes, okay. World Economic Forum, it was established by Klaus Schwab in 1971. He was the founder of it. It is a members-only elite group. They pay a fee, dues, to be part of the World Economic Forum. And Klaus Schwab is the founder of digitized medical records, digital currency, and digital ID. And so all the private elites meet together every year. And in October 15th of 2019 in Geneva, Switzerland, the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, will host Event 201, a high-level simulation exercise for pandemic preparedness and response, and it will be held in New York City on Friday the 18th. So if you haven't looked at these videos, if you go to this website, you can pull up the videos, you click on videos, and if you watch them, you will see that everything that has played out in the last 3 years are in these videos, verbatim. And it was very eye-opening for us as medical professionals to see all of this go down. And I will be very honest that my husband and I were beyond angry when we saw it. And when the pandemic first started, the only thing I can say is rage. And I battled the heaviest rage I have ever dealt with in my life. And it took 3 weeks for me to pull out of it. And there is nowhere in any of our medical textbooks of how this pandemic went down that this is how viruses are transferred. When they're saying it's on your clothes, and it's on your pets, and it's on your newspaper, and it's on your groceries, and that's a bioweapon. That's anthrax. Viruses don't transfer this way. And we couldn't figure out why the medical professionals weren't screaming at the top of their lungs on social media. This is wrong. This is not okay. This isn't how it's done. And I got on Facebook and on my own pages, and I had my own open meetings and said, this isn't it. This isn't right. Something's wrong. I don't understand what's going on, but this isn't right. And little did I know I was being bold. I thought as medical professionals, our job is to at first do no harm. We're not supposed to cause harm to our patients. We're supposed to take care of you and make you healthy to the best of our knowledge. So we were a little put out when we saw this. And then we started seeing where doctors were starting to reach out and say something. This isn't okay. Something's wrong. And all of a sudden, they're disappearing off of their pages. And we're going, what's going on? Why is this happening? And I can honestly say, we didn't understand. We could not understand what was going on. And then the next thing, Bill Gates got on and he started saying, the way that we're going to handle this is, doctors, you are not to treat a single COVID patient, period. If you do treat a COVID patient, you will lose your license. And the medical doctors in Washington State received a letter from the Department of Health that laid that out. And it's still in place. And we were stunned. What do you mean? Because when you look back at the history of all other epidemics, all doctors, it was everybody on board. What drugs do you know that can take care of this? What do you know? How can we get this under control now? No, it was not allowed. We were not allowed to collaborate at all, none of them. And if they did, they lost their license. In other countries, they were a little more bold and were able to, in some areas, not all, and still locked down on their abilities to manage this. So we were a little stunned, because every single epidemic that has ever occurred, it has been, what can we do to get together and come up with a cure for this as fast as we can? Every single one of them, when you look at them in history. So then they announced that they were going to bring out the shots, the vaccines. And they said, this is the first of their kind. And we're going to roll them out as fast as we can. The shortest testing trial on a vaccine to date in history is 5 years. And that's to go through creating the vaccine, that is to take it through animal trials. When the animals stop dying or having health complications, then it moves to human trials. If they don't meet the death threshold with the vaccine, then it can then go to market. So there's some very distinct lines with how a vaccine can go to market. And this bypassed all of that, and we couldn't understand what happened, because when you study mRNA, it's been around for a long time. The problem is it never left animal trials because the death factor was too high. So we couldn't understand how something like this went from, no, it's not working with animals, to boom, it's in humans. It just really didn't make any sense to us at all. Steve and I are not anti-vaccines. It's a personal choice. If you want to have vaccines, you have vaccines. But this worried us. This made us very, very concerned. So I wanted you to see a video, Serena, from Moderna, so that you can understand their platform. Moderna's name comes from the word modified RNA. So she's going to switch this over real quick to 2 videos so that you can hear them. The first one is Moderna, and we're going to watch maybe a minute and a half of this. And we'll turn the volume up on that one because it's pretty quiet. You can find this on the website. Can you turn that up? Okay, stop. And next video. Thank you. So that was the Prime Minister of Israel. And as he said in the video, they have a 98% digital record plus medical card, which has allowed them to track every single one of their people in their population. What stood out to those of us in the medical profession is that only one shot was allowed in Israel. Canada has 6. We had 3, we're down to 2, and other countries had multiples as well. As you know, if you get a flu vaccine or shingles or like that, there's lots of different ones to choose from. So why did one country get one company only? And that really stood out to us. And the only thing I could deduce is that Pfizer was using an entire country to be their test subjects. And that kind of blew us away. So, as I said, Klaus Schwab wants us all to have digital medical records. It's called Care Everywhere, and it's in process in the United States as well. And that is part of the World Economic Forum's goal, so that they can track you anywhere in the world, your health, and what's going on. So as Moderna said in their video, they use nanoparticles, nanolipid particles, to deliver the mRNA. And nanoparticles were developed by DARPA, which is the United States government. And nanoparticles have been in trials for many years. This study in Frontiers in Pharmacology, September 27th, toxicity of nanoparticles on the reproductive system in animal models, a review. And it's a very hefty study, very hefty. So reading through it, it was the conclusion of the authors that because there was so much reproductive damage in male and female animals that the nanoparticles caused, that they didn't feel that nanoparticles were safe yet in 2017 to be used in humans. So nanoparticles are a delivery system, as he said. It's how they deliver a vaccine into an animal or human. And when you read through the study, the uteruses failed in the animals, the ovaries failed in the animals, sperm count dropped or stopped. The animals could not reproduce anymore. The animals had babies that had birth defects. There was a number of problems that were noted in this study. So when they say that nanoparticles are simple, easy, and don't cause harm, that study in 2017 says otherwise. And on May 23rd of 2019, MIT has a biotech startup that uses nanoparticles to induce immune tolerance. And what's happening is they're finding that so many people are rejecting the drugs on the market. They're trying to use nanoparticles to be able to introduce drugs into the human body to make you not reject them. And it says the approach is a big upgrade compared to some other immunodilators, which simply suppress the formation of all immune cells in the body. Selecta's technology to engineer the immune system and tolerate specific drugs is their goal. Overall, Selecta believes unwanted immune responses are the biggest reason that drug candidates fail. Company officials are hoping their technology can dramatically expand the applications of treatments like gene therapy and lead to better patient outcomes for every drug that's hampered by immune responses. And there's that word gene again. The problem is they're using people's genetics to create drugs. And what they're doing is altering your genes to make it so that you will accept the drug. The problem is when they did the human genome studies, they had to cancel it. They've called it a failure because the whole design of the human genome study was to put an end to cancer. But what they found is once they started altering one gene in the human body, it then spun a whole different cascade someplace else in the body because the way this is designed is miraculous. And it's not to be messed with. So when you take a drug that goes in and takes one of your genes and changes it, it changes you. But if you're a male or female, especially a woman wanting to have a baby, it can also alter your fetus and then their children and then their children. That's what genetic manipulation does. So let's have some fun now that you got done with all that heavy stuff, right? That's the past. Now we're moving forward, right? All right. So these are the most common questions that I get. So let's see if you can play the true and false game. All right. China leads in total COVID deaths. The first documented case of acute coronavirus infection was in 2019. There were no medical treatment options for COVID available except watch and wait, monoclonal antibodies, and remdesivir. Everyone can have remdesivir. mRNA does not travel throughout the body. It only stays in the arm that it was injected in. There are medical billing codes for people who are vaccinated and unvaccinated. All right. So here under worldometers, you will see the United States at the top, and we are the leader in the number of COVID deaths. And if you look down at the bottom, I put a snippet for China, and they've recorded 5,272 deaths. And if you look far over to the right at their population, and you go back up to the United States, look far right to our population. You see that? So here's the problem that us as medical professionals have. How many times have you heard of people from other countries coming to the United States to our top-notch medical facilities to have surgeries or get care? How many people do you hear that are from other countries that come to the United States to get their doctorates? Yeah, because we have cutting-edge technology in our medical facilities. Cutting edge. So when I saw this number, why are we leading in death? Right. There's lots of reasons. So when I looked up why the United States was the leader in deaths, their answer was because we didn't wear masks and we did not do quarantine enough and we did not stand 6 feet apart. Then the next answer was because not enough people were vaccinated and the unvaccinated were killing everybody. So I had a hard time with that because when we look at past epidemics, not everybody got a vaccine. So in medical, we're trained to ask the why and keep asking why until we get a solid answer. And when I kept asking why, it just didn't add up. So the second question, the first documented case of acute coronavirus is 2019. Actually, it was in Greece, and this study was published and it was received 19th of January 2018, a rare case of human coronavirus 229E associated with acute respiratory distress syndrome in a healthy adult. She's 45 years old, female patient. She was a teacher. She had totally perfect health. And they could not understand what was going on. So they did some PCR tests on her and some medical tests and decided she had a definite lower respiratory tract infection. So they gave her 2 medications, Z-Paks being one of them, and they put her on 5 liters per minute of oxygen. And then her stats started changing again, so they gave her an antimicrobial and changed her drug again. And then they gave her systemic corticosteroids and bronchodilators, were added 40 hours after because she started going into severe respiratory distress, and they wanted to avoid intubation and respirators. So they increased her oxygen, put her on another drug because they thought she might have a possible staph infection as well. Her improvement was drastic within 24 hours. The patient was discharged after 1 week, and they did a 23-month follow-up that had no side effects from HCoV229E. And it shows the pictures of her lungs. If you'd like to see, you can pull this study off. It shows her lungs going from clear to almost not getting any oxygen in at all. So she was literally heading into ICU, and they were able to pull her around. And this is what I was talking about in the beginning is the medical doctors teaming together to find a cure. And when you read the study, that's what they did. And that's what should be done. And that was not what was allowed for you at all. So next question. Sorry, backwards. This is so not mine. There we go. Remdesivir. Who shouldn't have it? Anyone with liver disease, hepatitis, fatty liver disease, alcoholic cirrhosis of the liver, liver failure or liver transplants, etc. Anyone with kidney disease, diabetes, renal failure, gout, Fabry, and on and on. Anyone on any of the multiples of the 368 medications that it is contraindicated in, especially statins, blood pressure medications, and diabetes medications. Remdesivir should not be taken if a patient is on 2 or more of the listed drugs, according to drugs.com. Because in many cases, when you read on drugs.com, it can cause fatality.
So the answer is anybody who desires to live. No.
So the next one is how fast do intramuscular injections work? In other words, how fast does a vaccine work? Because you've been told that once injected, the mRNA stays exactly in one place, your arm. The way the human body is designed, it is called your circulatory system, and it carries oxygen from the heart to the arteries to the veins and nutrients, and it removes waste. It takes 1 minute for your blood to circulate entirely throughout your body. 1 minute. That's why you can have a lethal injection, right? If you've gone to the dentist, it takes just very little time for that Novocaine to take effect. Or maybe you've had surgery, right? Count backwards. 10, 9, you're out, right? That's how fast it works. So we were led to believe that the mRNA stays in one place, but in actuality, it doesn't. The European Parliament just recently, January of 2023, had and how it moves. And your dendrite cells are the sentinels of your immune system. They're like trees. And they're responsible for starting the adaptive immune responses. And it's used in your innate immune system and your adaptive immune system. So it does not stay in your arm, it travels throughout the entire body, which is why we're running into some side effects with people. So our next one is, are there billing codes? Yes, there are billing codes. So this one, T50.B.95, is adverse effect of other viral vaccines. So if you have an adverse effect to vaccines, your doctor can put that in your medical records. But Z28.31 is under an immunization of COVID-19 vaccine. And as you can see below that, there's several different billing codes that are used. So that will determine your vaccination status. So those do exist. All right, so we're going to now move on to long COVID or post-COVID syndrome. And what we have, catching up here, there we go. Post-COVID syndrome visible in the DNA. This was March 1st of 2023. And the researchers can see that genes associated with taste and smell, as well as cell metabolism, are affected in individuals with post-COVID syndrome. So the problem with this study is it doesn't delineate whether someone was vaccinated or not. So what they are seeing is that genes are being altered one way or the other, whether someone has a vaccine or not. If they've had COVID, there is some genetic change going on, and it is causing permanent change in brain function, sense of smell, etc. And then the next one is that we're seeing a lot is post-COVID stress disorder, which is another word for PTSD. So that started way back in the beginning on how people are unfortunately being emotionally damaged from COVID-19 and the lockdowns, et cetera. So we are seeing that. So these are some of the symptoms that, can you read that? Can we turn the lights down? Can you read that? I'll read it for you. Fatigue that can be debilitating, breathlessness or shortness of breath, chronic cough, skin rashes, headaches, migraines, random fevers, insomnia, anxiety, depression, psychosis, paranoia, hallucinations, personality changes, muscle weakness, joint and muscle pain, stomach pain, which is your upper abdomen. People say my stomach hurts and they point down here. Your stomach is up here. Digestive issues, constipation, diarrhea, loose stools, lower abdominal pain, chest pain, heart palpitations, tachycardia, bradycardia, high and low blood pressure, brain fog, memory loss, dementia, changes in women's periods, blood clots, fibromyalgia, arthritis, neurological issues, tremor, difficulty walking, difficulty talking, feeling like skin is crawling or stuttering, loss of ability to do daily activities, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is called POTS, loss of taste of sense and smell, permanent brain damage, hearing things others do not, loss of appetite, traumatic brain injury or post-concussion syndrome, blood sugar changes, hypoglycemia, diabetes, lung abnormalities seen on x-ray, permanent impairment in one or more organs, thyroid dysregulation, adrenal gland failure, and post-COVID stress disorder. This is, we're not talking vaccine. This is after somebody who's had COVID. These are the symptoms that we're seeing between anywhere from 3 weeks to a year after having COVID, and some people 2 or more years now since they've had it. So now we'll look at the adverse side effects of the vaccine. The following slides are from my presentation that I did here in January of 2021, making an informed decision about COVID-19 vaccines. And my slide stated, make sure that you have all your affairs in order. And I can't tell you the number of people that came down on me with this. They were angry. Personal will, power of attorney. If you're not able to work due to an altered state of health after the vaccine, you will need appropriate financial plans in order. Know what your medical insurance covers and does not cover for long-term care. Do you have long-term care insurance? Consider having additional insurance that covers disability or accidental death. If something happens to you by federal law, your family members cannot take any legal action towards the vaccine companies. You might be able to take legal action if the shot was mandated by a union or employer. In some areas, that's true. In some areas, it is not now. Since I wrote this, it is not known if you can take legal action against your medical doctor for an EUA biologic, and that we still don't know. I also stated what you should do to prepare for the vaccine. Do not take the vaccine if you're sick, have a fever or diarrhea. Do not take the vaccine if you have already had COVID-19. You do not vaccinate against something that you already have. You may have severe adverse side effects, which we've seen. Do not take the vaccine if you are taking aspirin, ibuprofen, Aleve, or Tylenol. Get off at least a week before taking the shot. Talk to your doctor first if you're on any immune suppression drugs, and do not take the vaccine in combination with other vaccines at the same time, or if you had a vaccine in the last month, because there were no tests or trials on combinations of medications or combinations of vaccines, and there still aren't. Symptoms of vaccine injury, and this is any vaccine. Acute joint pain, acute spine pain, severe acute muscle spasms and bone pain, difficulty breathing, swallowing, depression and or anxiety, health pain, head pain, headaches, migraines, light sensitivity or sound sensitivity, fatigue that can be debilitating, dizziness, vomiting, brain fog, difficulty remembering, cognitive impairment, dementia, Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury, brain damage, fevers that can go as high as 104, we've seen 106, inability to walk, talk, or use limbs, acute myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack, cancer, allergies that you didn't have prior to the vaccine, eczema, psoriasis, hives, and flushing, and man, have I seen a lot of that. Speech impediment, ADD, ADHD, early onset dementia, Alzheimer's, colitis, IBS, Crohn's disease, or other digestive issues, tics, repetitive movements, uncontrolled outbursts, mood changes, stroke, heart attack, narcolepsy, cataplexy, which is falling asleep at any time, can't get out of bed, can't perform activities of daily living, pneumonia, bronchitis, sinus infections, thrush, chronic cough, autoimmune diseases, blood clots, fibromyalgia, polymyalgia, Bell's palsy, which is the falling of one side of the face, swelling that can be acute anywhere in the body, difficulty concentrating or memory loss, sterility, seizures, convulsions, whole or partial body paralysis or individual organ paralysis, anaphylaxis, myocarditis, pericarditis, Guillain-Barré, Epstein-Barr, polymyelitis, meningitis, encephalitis, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, transverse myelitis, myelitis, encephalomyelitis, meningioencephalomyelitis, pregnancy, difficulty getting pregnancy, can't get pregnant, sudden abortion, birth defects of fetus, Sjogren's syndrome, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, non-anaphylactic allergic reactions, thrombocytopenia, disseminated and vascular coagulation, venous thromboembolisms, chronic fatigue, arthritis, Kawasaki disease, multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, vaccine-enhanced disease, which means if you already are dealing with one or more diseases, it'll make it worse. Sudden infant death syndrome and death. I did it. So what the FDA said in October of 2020, she's going to change that. So you can see October of 2020, want to pop that up to slide 1? No, 1 please first, then 4. CBR plans for monitoring COVID-19 vaccine safety effectiveness, Dr. Stephen Anderson, October 30th of 2020. Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee is what CBER stands for. And in that, Dr. Anderson reports that if there are side effects, that the VAERS vaccine adverse event reporting system is up and running and managed by the CDC and the FDA for medical doctors and for any patient that has been harmed by a vaccine. It came into effect many years ago. And what surprises us is there are a lot of doctors that don't know about it. So we will skip to slide 16, please. So the doctor stated in October of 2020, FDA safety surveillance of COVID-19 vaccines, draft working list of possible adverse event outcomes subject to change. And this is what they were expecting to see at that time, possibly Guillain-Barré, encephalomyelitis, transverse myelitis, encephalitis, myelitis, convulsions, seizures, stroke, narcolepsy, cataplexy, anaphylaxis, heart attacks, swelling of the heart, autoimmune disease, deaths, pregnancy and birth outcomes, other acute demyelinating diseases, which is like MS, Parkinson's, non-anaphylactic allergic reactions, thrombocytopenia, disseminated intravascular coagulation, embolisms, arthritis, joint pain, Kawasaki disease, multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, and vaccine-enhanced disease. October 22nd, 2020.
What was that last one?
Vaccine-enhanced disease. That means when the vaccine is given to somebody who already has lupus, cancer, et cetera, it just makes it worse. Back to the, yep. All right. So they had this information in advance. So what we now have is a case report, multifocal necrotizing encephalitis myocarditis after vaccine. This was October 1st of 2022. He was a 76-year-old man with Parkinson's disease after his third COVID-19 vaccine. Patient was had died. And this study gives his story. So it is there. It's not being hidden. It can be pulled. Dr. John Campbell shows vaccine-induced spike protein in the heart and brain, February 15, 2023, video title, Vaccine Brain Injury. This is actually the spike protein in the brain, and he also shows it in the heart. More than 1,000 adverse reactions to COVID-19 shots reported in New Brunswick, Canada. They have 6 COVID biologics from Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Novavax, AstraZeneca, and Medicos. And they reported of, in January, the CDC detected a safety concern for ischemic stroke in people ages 65 and older who received the booster shot, but concluded that the data suggests it's unlikely that the signal in the CDC's vaccine safety data link monitoring system represents a real clinical risk. Is anybody doing anything? Yes. United States Senator Ron Johnson has had numerous people contact him because of their injuries due to vaccine. And he has had roundtable after roundtable after roundtable. If you look him up, United States Senator Ron Johnson, he has, this video is a bunch of medical practitioners from all walks that did this talk and gave a ton of information and a real worth watch. So this is the big one that people come to me. Can't I just do pine needle tea and detox baths and take some chlorine dioxide and nattokinase? And here's my response. Please stop. As you can see, pine needle tea, if something has been genetically altered, it's not going to work. It won't. I am working, there's a ton of millions and millions of medical practitioners that are working really, really hard to help people get well now, post-COVID, whether they're vaccinated or not, doesn't matter. Unfortunately, COVID-19 did some real hard damage to people. And the vaccines hasn't helped. There are people, we have patients that are rocking it. They've had all 4 and 5 booster shots and they are rocking it and doing great. And we've had patients that have had 1 shot that didn't do well, 2 shots didn't do well, 3rd shot didn't do well. We've lost patients. This is the first time in 31 years of owning a business we've actually lost patients. It's hard. We have a funeral coming up. So there are lots of things on the internet that you're going to see. Just take this, just do that. And I'm sorry. That's not fair to give somebody who's really sick crazy hope like that. Because it takes more than that. The human body is bio-individual, meaning God didn't make us all the same. And you can't give each person the same drug and expect the same reactions. It doesn't work that way because we're all different. So when people come to me, as I tell my staff, I feel like I'm playing whack-a-mole because it takes a lot to help, and we got to put all the fires out. So it's not easy. So the biggest thing that you can do is point those people in the right direction. Bye, Pastor. And help them get help. Don't give them advice because you can really hurt somebody, especially with chlorine dioxide. You can really make someone sick with that one. Okay. So the next question I get is, why are so many people sick and dying? And everybody thinks it's a black and white answer, and they know exactly what the answer is. So as it was stated before, the COVID aftermath, persistent organ damage, 1 year, lung abnormalities occur, and 59% had organ impairment at 1 year. 3 in 5 people with long COVID have impairment at least 1 organ, and 1 in 4 have impairment in 2 or more organs. So that includes the heart, lungs, kidneys, liver, pancreas, and spleen. Permanent impairment. So people ask me this all the time. It's all the vaccine. The vaccine's killing everybody. But you have to ask these kind of questions. What was their pre-COVID health, their mental health, their genetics? How many drugs were they on? And I don't mean weed and heroin. Well, they could have been. But, metformin and statins and blood pressure medications, and how healthy was their diet? And I'm not talking Weight Watchers. It's what were they putting in their mouth every day? How high was their stress levels? Had they had major surgeries? Did they have addictions? Was there a divorce, a death, a diagnosis of something, a change in jobs or loss of business? Parents diagnosed with something? Were their children diagnosed? Were there issues going on, financial? That all impacts your health. And then we ask the same questions. What was their health during COVID? And then did they start using weed because marijuana went through the roof at that time and that severely alters the immune system? Or did they start some other drugs? Or did they start smoking cigarettes? Did they have 1 or more of the COVID vaccines, the flu shots, the shingle shots, etc.? That compounds it as well. And then you go into post-COVID, and where's their mental health at now? And then look at all the other questions on top of it, because most people during COVID gained 10 to 25 pounds. And then you add stress and everything else on top of that. So the next question is, what can be done? And I told you a bit there. It's a multi-organ, multifaceted healing approach and process. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Genetics does play a big role in this one. And some people will heal in a short time, some people will take longer, and sadly, some will not. So more advanced blood tests are more than likely going to be needed, MRI scans, and looking for organ tissues and damages. The biggest thing is reducing inflammation, because we know inflammation drives this. And then your diet, what you're eating, right? Anti-inflammatory foods, for sure. Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, clean meats, good fats. And then the gut-brain barrier, that's one of the biggest things we work on. 80% of your immune system lies in your stomach. And then working with your mitochondria, those are the powerhouses of the cell that turn your energy on. And most people, after having COVID, their energy shot, absolutely shot. And it's because of the damage to the mitochondria. And then lifestyle overhaul is needed with many people: stress reduction, change of jobs, getting out of debt, downsizing their homes, etc. So I wish I had really, really super good positive news for you, but this has been a ride for all of us. And in the medical profession especially, because it created a big divide. And I can say this is the first time in history that medical doctors and alternative doctors got on the same page. That was a first ever in history, because they don't like us. And this was the first time we banded together and said, what do we do? Those of us that were on the side of this was just kind of not what we studied in college. So I wish I had really good news for you. What I can tell you is there is hope. We are getting people well. It just takes time. And if you know somebody that's suffering and that has symptoms, give them hope that there are professionals out there that are working on this. And we are working around the clock trying to learn from each other. What worked for you with this patient? What worked with you with this patient? So that we can start adapting those things to get y'all better. So I want to thank you very much. And if you have any questions, come grab me afterwards. But this is where COVID's at now, and we're just moving forward. Thank you.